Welcome to the Kinky Cast, a sexually explicit podcast for adults. You are listening to a weekly publication, produced every Friday morning. This is our weekly exploration in the kinky world of BDSM and alternative relationships. Today, we present episode 359, Dr. Elizabeth Sheff and the Bonding App. Don't forget to stop by our webpage for information about this show and others. KinkyCast.com. With the coronavirus being active, please practice social distancing. Here's your host, Woody.
Thanks, Max, and welcome to another edition of the Kinky Cast. Online with me from lovely Chattanooga, Tennessee, is Dr. Elizabeth Sheff, also known as Dr. Eli. How are you today?
Great, thanks. How are you doing, Woody?
I'm wonderful. Sitting here in the cooling weather,
enjoying the basement.
Enjoying the basement and being locked in the house for damn near ever.
For COVID.
Yes, indeed.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I am also locked in the house. We don't have a basement, but I am coming to you from the guest room.
Well, the guest room is where an important person like you hangs out because you are an educator and a writer and all kinds of things, and a researcher, I guess.
Researcher, expert witness. I do continuing education for counselors and therapists on consensual non-monogamy and BDSM. And I also provide lawyers continuing education on just information on sex and gender minorities, especially consensual non-monogamy and BDSM.
I would pay to be a fly on the wall in a courtroom when you're in being a professional witness. That would be very interesting, I think.
It is. Sometimes I think my soccer mom looks like I totally look like the girl next door at 50, kind of allows me to say things that the jury is like, oh my.
No, but she's not goth at all.
Right. I mean, I just put it in like matter-of-fact language and don't act ashamed or embarrassed about speaking about it. And I think it helps them be just like, oh, okay. Oh, people like choking and might do that on purpose sometimes, really.
Can you imagine that? Oh, my God.
Yes. No, some people cannot. But in an assault case, for instance, or a murder case, it's really important. That could be consensual behavior. It really could be something that people talked about beforehand and are doing because it's fun for them.
And it's not such a fine line between murder and having fun.
Well, when it's an accident, breath play, that's one of the reasons breath play is so dangerous the cases I've been on involving murder have been breath play. And if, in my opinion, it was not murder, it was not intent, it was manslaughter at the most. I mean, it was a tragic accident.
Yeah, I don't think accident gets to be called murder.
Well, manslaughter, but I mean, it's intent is what they're asking.
Yeah.
If I can demonstrate that this could have been consensual, then it speaks to intent. Versus if you don't bring up that breath play is something people do, and they can and often do it consensually. It's not necessarily evidence of intent to kill.
So in one of your many things that you do in life, you have a thing called the Bonding Project. What on earth is that?
The Bonding Project is this app that helps people figure out, it's a test, basically, a relationship test that helps people figure out what bonding style works for them. And it kind of puts them, the first test puts people in kind of one of four larger categories, either one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, or solo, depending on how they answer the questions. And then there's obviously different ways to do. For instance, if you're doing one-to-many, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do that. And so we're still working on creating more tests to further refine as we go. But our first test, the kind of main sorting tool, we've finished, and I'm so excited about it. This is actually its beta launch right now. It's online, and we're encouraging people to take it at thebondingproject.com to let us know what they think of it. Like, once you get your results, do you think that they are accurate? Do they reflect how you actually think you bond? Are you surprised by something you learned?
And if you don't remember that link, you can find it on our links page on the show page for today's show.
Excellent.
And along with lots of other fun and factual things that you're into. So Bonding Project is kind of a personality thing?
Kind of, only it's not like the Myers-Briggs, for instance, which is a common personality test. And in some ways, a little bit of the model we use, just that idea. One of the big differences from the Myers-Briggs is that we focus not on the person's personality, but on what they want out of their relationships specifically. And obviously that involves their personality, but it's not a holistic personality test like, are you an introvert kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's very focused on how do you like to relate to other people. Another big difference between us and the Myers-Briggs is that the Bonding Project is based in science. We, meaning me, I was the science person on the team, the social scientist, did a deep dive into all of the research on relationship satisfaction among people in consensually non-monogamous and other forms of relationship. But monogamy is just a little bit more obvious in a way. We know a lot more what contributes to satisfaction in monogamy, that we don't necessarily call things by their usual names. One-on-one, one-to-one bonding could be monogamy, but for some people it's either that or aromanticism, or it's not necessarily like a choice between one-to-one and one-to-many for people who are, I feel like I went down a little rabbit hole there.
No, I certainly get it, and it's not a binary thing to where you're either intended to be with one person the rest of your life, or or locked into a poly thing the rest of your life, and people are fluid also. They move back and forth.
Absolutely.
When you're in a great monogamous relationship, you may be there for 20 years or the rest of your life or whatever, or not.
And I think that's a great point, that even when you're talking about a specific relationship style, it really depends on who you're talking about. Like, which partners specifically are you talking about? Because depending on how they handle it, one-to-many can be very kind of smooth and congenial and everybody kind of getting along well, or it can be really conflictual and terrible. Like, if people screw it up, one-to-many sucks.
Well, it does. And sometimes it's completely out of your control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, if people screw up one-to-one, that sucks too, or many-to-many. Like, it all sucks. It all depends on how the people do it. So it can be fantastic. Each different relationship style can be great, especially if people know what they want before they get in the relationship. That's one of the main reasons we developed this. I see in my coaching practice, I see mostly people who have, one of them has a strong desire for non-monogamy and another one has a strong desire for monogamy. And clearly they have these very different bonding styles that are having a hard time meshing. Maybe if they knew that before they got together, if there was some way they could take a test, for instance, and compare their results, they could be like, oh, you know what? Monogamy is going to be an issue for us. We should think about this. I want one-to-one and you want one-to-many or many-to-many.
Good to know that up front.
Yes, exactly. Until now, there hasn't been a test for that. And people haven't really had kind of the skills, tools, or ideas to necessarily talk about it unless they've already found some kind of non-monogamous community that is having that discussion, or a queer community, or an LGBTQ community, or a kinky community. Like all sorts of different people are having that conversation, but they tend to be more on the fringes, and the mainstream is still trying to figure out if there's anything else they can do but cheat on each other, or be monogamous, or be alone.
Well, you hit on a point there, cheat on each other. So the test that you were talking about that you have, has been a test. It's called divorce, and it's a bit of an unfortunate one.
But absolutely, that's an IRL test. The test I'm talking about is an app that you can do on your phone.
Right. In the bottom line here, you look at the amount of cheating that goes on and pick a country, U.S., whatever. And there's a fairly high percentage of it to where people are actively testing out, I won't use the word poly relationships, but certainly additional relationships to their primary. And as soon as that all comes up to a head at home, and then hard decisions have to be made, whether to continue it or to cease the relationship. It's a very hard thing. Going in, if two people can figure out that they have the ability or even the will to be in a multiple relationship, is certainly going to be helpful.
Absolutely. And maybe the kind of the vocabulary we provide on the Bonding Project page, one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, solo, it comes without, hopefully, as much baggage or judgment as like monogamy sounds so stifling in a way for some people, or safe for others. And it's got all of these connotations to it already. So if you say monogamy, then you already set some people off on, oh, well, I'm judging this and this and that. Whereas if you use the idea of one-to-one bonding, we're not necessarily looking at the cultural labels. We're more looking at what style works for you. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that.
So tell me about the science that went into the project.
So we use social science, literature, and others' research around relationship satisfaction. And I did most of the digging in consensual non-monogamy and what satisfies people in that realm. Because I felt like it was, well, for one thing, they often compared their samples to people in monogamous and or cheating relationships. So I got kind of 2 for 1 there. And sometimes they talked about different forms of consensual non-monogamy. So I read everything I could find on measures of relationship satisfaction. And then we turned those into questions. And those measures are things like, it turns out, people who enjoy or are kind of prone to enjoy consensual non-monogamy have a few things in common. Like they like novelty, they can be risk takers, they're high in desire for communication, and sometimes high in EQ, emotional intelligence, and sometimes not so much. I guess that's characteristic of all sorts of people, though. But we looked at these factors and then wrote questions around them. And not only those factors from other people's research on consensual non-monogamy, but my own as well. For instance, I found that a lot of people like the idea of themselves having access to non-monogamy, like being the one with multiple partners, but it's much harder for them to then share those partners with other people. Like they want multiple partners, but they don't necessarily really want their partners to have multiple partners.
Isn't that kind of fucked up just in general?
I mean, I can understand it, I'm not saying that it's okay to enforce it, but realizing it's what you want and then working towards, okay, How much do I want multiple partners? Is it worth going through the pain of allowing my partners to have multiple partners? Okay, if we're going to do that, then I'm going to start working on this now before you're actually seeing someone else. I'm going to work on buttressing myself, getting ready to manage that pain. That's like if you really decide, okay, we're going to do one to many or many to many, then you can decide, okay, to get ready for that, I'm going to imagine not only me getting laid with multiple people, what fun, woohoo, but you hooking up with someone else and me either being alone at home that night. Okay, what am I going to do with myself that evening?
Well, you could practice compersion.
Right, exactly. Exactly. But I guess you have the idea, the concept of compersion, even because of the people you've been around. Like they think about that, they talk about that. A lot of people, especially in mainstream relationships, have never heard the word and really do not understand the concept. So to even consider the concept, consider the idea, it helps to hear the label and be like, oh, there's an idea for that. What is that? People talk about that. And so that kind of thing, I don't know if you could learn the word compersion exactly on the bonding project, but you could learn not only all sorts of things about yourself, but also find links to places like the Kinky Cast, where you can learn about non-monogamous relationships and how people combine them with BDSM, which, sidebar, is super common.
I think I need to write the compersion book.
Oh, I love that idea.
Yeah, it's just not understood well enough.
I agree. If you are going to write that book, I think it's a fantastic idea. I love it. And I highly recommend Jillian Derry's book, Love's Refraction, Jealousy and Compersion in Queer Women's Polyamorous Relationships. And her name is Jillian Derry, Deri.
Which will be on our links page.
It's so good. It's such a good book. I love that book. It's a little dated now, but it's so worth a read. What she says about love and jealousy and compersion could be applicable to pretty much anyone. A solo poly, a regular poly, a monogamous person, that's who she talks to, queer poly women, but it really could be interesting for pretty much anybody who's interested in expanded relationships.
One of our listeners wrote in a while back and said the thought of compersion was preventing them from even getting into a relationship. They could not imagine anybody they were with being with somebody else, and so they didn't get with anybody.
I mean, I could see that as a strong signal that that person is a one-to-one bonder. Maybe they know of themselves that one-to-many or many-to-many is not going to work for them, or perhaps a solo bonder. But solo bonders often have a lot more kind of flexibility around what if they have partners, what their other partners do. They often don't want to kind of be in charge of saying, yes, you can do that. No, you can't. The solo bonders are generally like doing their own thing and their partners are doing their own thing. And when it intersects, that's fantastic. And when it doesn't, that's fine. But they often will allow their partners to have other partners. So this person who couldn't even conceive of compersion, I don't think it means that they can't relate to anyone. I think what it means is they should find another one-on-one bonder to relate with. Somebody else who's like, yeah, I only want to be with one person at a time. I don't want to share my partner either. That's the ideal match. I mean, obviously not every single one-on-one bonder is going to bond with the other one-on-one bonder, but...
And then making sure that cheating doesn't come in that door, because then the whole thing would go down the tubes.
Right. Absolutely. And that's the case with every kind of personality test. Like we're hoping that people are being honest with themselves on the test, and then the results they get will really tell them. Whereas they're like, nah, heck no, I don't want to share. I only want to cheat. It's not, I don't know, those results wouldn't necessarily be accurate if they don't tell us that.
Your results may vary. Yeah.
Exactly. With your honesty with yourself and with us.
And it's also a mark in time. If I took the test today and I took the test 4 years from now, it might be completely different.
Absolutely. And we're hoping, in fact, that people will take the test over time, that we will store their answers and they can compare it to their previous answers. We're also working towards having people being able to compare their answers to each other and see where they match, how and if they match, where, for instance, you could compare 5 people's responses and see where that polycule might run into some issues, or not, where their strengths are.
I could see this being added to my Apple Health app on my phone, because I get all my charting of all my records, everything from heart rate to weight loss. And so I need relationship health in there also.
Oh, that's a great idea. Apple will want to buy us.
Yeah, exactly. I could think of worse things.
Yes.
Oh, crazy days. In your spare time, you write books.
Yes. I'm working on the big book about children in polyamorous families, the major research book. Working on that. It's taking a long time, and people were asking for something just kind of short that they could give their parents or give as a holiday gift, or something that's very short, summary to the point about really what do the research findings say so far.
Light reading with a surprise.
Yes. So wrote a quick book on that. It's like a little paperback, or a Kindle, not a heavy research book, but just summarizes in super brief what my major findings are. So it's much more for lay people, while I'm still working on the much heavier, longer academic book that is going to be more kind of data heavy. This one, Children in Polyamorous Families, is the brief summary of the research. And then probably in 2022-ish, if I can get it together, I will write Growing Up in a Polyamorous Family, which will be the thick, heavy book on kids in polyamorous families. One of the things that stalled me out on that is it's mostly white people. And I'm hoping to find, obviously they won't be involved in the longitudinal research, having started in the, 1996. But I'm hoping to find a more diverse sample of people who've grown up in polyamorous families. So if you are a family of color and you are hearing this, a BIPOC family, I would love to interview your kids, just so I can get a more complete sense of the community and not kind of such a heavily white perspective on it. So
we have listeners that fit your criteria, and so we will encourage them to contact you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Again, her link is on the show page.
I'll give you links galore.
Tell us a little bit about growing up in a polyamorous family. We have had folks on the show that have younger kids, and even some that have grown up to teenagers. But as people then move out of home in young adulthood, do they take some of the polyamory with them?
Not necessarily as a romantic lifestyle, but as a communication and emotional intimacy strategy. Absolutely. These kids learn what turn out to be
emotional resilience tools in their families. They learn how to communicate. They learn how to negotiate difficult things. They learn how to kind of identify self-responsibility within a situation. So actually what these kids are learning and bringing out from their kind of home base of polyamory communication style is how to recreate emotional intimacy when they leave home. how to recreate a supportive network of people who care about them. And that turns out to be an incredibly valuable life skill. And they occasionally do practice it within a polyamorous context. But more often than not, and maybe because many of them are still pretty young, they seem to be gravitating more towards one partner at a time. Some of them, although I have to say, are very clearly very polyamorous and have no pretense towards ever trying monogamy or thinking monogamy is going to be the right move for them. But more of them, the majority of them, are saying they're not sure. Like they're just going to see how their life goes. Non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy is one of the many options that they might consider. And it really depends on their partner, like how their life works out, what happens in their future. When you're talking to someone who's 17, they're often just figuring out how do they relate at all. And making some firm commitment towards monogamy or non-monogamy at that point seems premature to them, which I think is wise. That is premature.
So as a young man says to his girlfriend, I'm going to take you to meet my parents. All of them.
Mm-hmm.
What fun.
It depends on the girlfriend.
Yes.
Sometimes that young man in his peer group becomes a rock star. This one young woman was telling me about, she wasn't necessarily like telling everybody at the dinner party, whatever, like out of the blue, but it was somehow relevant to the conversation at the dinner party, that she had grown up in a polyamorous family, and she was the most interesting person there. Like everybody wanted to talk to her. She was definitely like the belle of the ball because she had this interesting story and everybody was super excited about her and excited to meet her. And, like she was the interesting one. And that was kind of fun for her. On the other side, though, if the sweeties, like the partner of the person who grew up in the polyamorous family, if their family of origin is religious and conservative, they don't tend to make a big deal out of it. Like that partner can generally hang with it and can go home and meet the parents, and that's fine. If they couldn't tolerate it, they often wouldn't be married to the polyamorous person or the person from the polyamorous family, who in two of these cases, I'm thinking about, both of those children of polyamorists became monogamous themselves and are legally monogamously married. And in one case, their in-laws are like, oh, okay, that's a little weird, but whatever. And in another case, it's just not even on the board to tell the in-laws. It's kind of irrelevant. It's not like something they're going to bring up. The parents don't hang out, so it's not ever going to come up. And they're like, we're just not even gonna, it would freak them out way too much. And there's no need for them to know.
And I would have to think a child growing up in a polyamorous family is going to be a lot more open to things going on in the world and sexualities and who they are, how sexuality fits on them.
Absolutely. And that's one of the advantages they talk about, is being open-minded and able to flex in different situations with different people. Like being exposed to all sorts of different people and an unconventional lifestyle form. They can handle people of other religions, other racial and ethnic backgrounds. They're open to new experiences, and they're not as thrown by it as some of their peers appear to be to them. They notice, like, first year at college, show up at the dorms. The kids from the polyamorous families are, able to reestablish social networks of emotional intimacy, whereas some of their peers are like, oh, these people are way too different. This is too different from home. I'm not managing this. I can't stay here.
In the family that I grew up in, it was very white bread. And, when I was started to date somebody that was, quote, interesting, that was always shunned because they're different than us.
Who would call them interesting, and what did interesting mean?
Interesting means in this case, it could have been anything. I had dated a Swiss girl, and they're not from this country. They're different.
Wow.
Oh my God. It's like,
Swiss women you think of as like very white.
yeah. And
White. And she didn't. Wow.
English was her second language. Ooh. I found it extremely interesting, but my parents were just mortified. Very weird. And the thing is, they put baggage on you. Your parents will put baggage on you for not accepting their ideas to the point where they kind of sabotage a relationship because it makes you overthink things. And I really am very regretful of trashing some of those relationships because of that. But, hindsight's 20/20.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Dr. Eli, I want to thank you for joining me on the Kinky Cast today. You've always got interesting things going on and fun stuff.
Thanks so much for having me. I always enjoy chatting with you, Woody.
And we're going to check out your new app.
Great.
When is the book coming out?
It's been out for several weeks now. I am not a businesswoman at all and did not do it was apparently a secret book, a secret release. So
Well, we won't tell anybody then. And it's called Children in Polyamorous Family.
Yes.
And there's a subtitle to that.
Research findings in brief.
Ooh. And that's available on Amazon and the usual places?
Yes.
Very good. That will be on the show page. Thank you so much for joining me again, and we will talk soon as you get some more interesting research out there. Always interesting to hear that.
Great. Thanks, Woody. Thanks for having me.
You have been listening to episode 359 of the Kinky Cast. For more information about this show, go to kinkycast.com. Views expressed are not representative of the management of the Kinky Cast. We welcome guests with opposing viewpoints. The Kinky Cast is a production of Rooster in the Round. On behalf of all our kinky crew, I'm Max.